The heirloom box was empty. I stared into the hollow, satin-lined space where our mother's diamond necklace should have been resting. $100,000 of legacy. Vanished just hours after her funeral. The cloying scent of my sister Clara's perfume still lingered in the air. She'd always been fast, but this was a new low, even for her. My phone buzzed. A text from Clara. "Hope you're holding up, Artie. I'm taking a little trip to grieve." I smirked, looking at the security feed on my monitor. There she was, at Logan Airport, practically glowing with greed. She thought she'd just stolen a fortune. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly comprehend, was that the stones clasped around her neck were worthless. Clara and I were never just siblings. We were an equation. She was the minus sign, always taking, and I was the plus, always trying to balance the books. Our mother, bless her soul, saw only her perfect daughter. Her last words to me weren't, "I love you," but a whispered, "Take care of Clara." I'm Arthur Sterling. At my company, Sterling & Sons Gemology, my life's work is discerning true value from clever imitation. I've spent 30 years spotting fakes, and my sister is the most convincing counterfeit I know. She'd hawked our grandfather's watch for a trip to Ibiza, sold Dad's first edition books for designer shoes. When Mom's health failed, I knew the necklace was her final target. It wasn't just jewelry. It was a $100,000 symbol of a legacy she never respected. To Clara, it was simply a pawn ticket to a new life, and her greed was as obvious as a poorly cut zircon. So, I prepared. I crafted a replica so flawless that only a master's loupe could tell the difference. A trap laid with a lifetime of frustrated certainty. Clara would never get it appraised. Why would she? In her mind, she'd already won. Clara has always needed to win, even when the prize was nothing more than our mother's misplaced faith. It started with a silver locket from our grandmother when we were 10. Mine vanished. I found it in a downtown pawn shop. When I confronted Clara, she produced tears faster than a summer storm. She told Mom I'd given it to her, then cruelly demanded it back. I was the one who got grounded. I bought my own locket back with 3 weeks of allowance. That was the day I learned her victimhood was a weapon, and our mother was her most willing target. Fast forward 20 years. Dad was gone, and Mom's savings were tied up in a few antique brooches she cherished, her emergency fund. Then, one day, they were gone too. Clara swore she knew nothing, her face a mask of practiced innocence. A month later, she pulled into the driveway in a gleaming sports car, babbling about a fantastic new job in marketing. Mom stood at the window, watching her daughter preen in the driver's seat, and I saw something break behind her eyes. She knew what that car had cost her. But to admit the truth was to admit her daughter was a parasite. So she smiled, told Clara how proud she was, and spent the next year secretly taking extra shifts at the library to make ends meet. It was a quiet, soul-crushing sacrifice, a final layer of protection for the daughter who was bleeding her dry. That was the moment the necklace became my problem. It wasn't just jewelry anymore. It was the final defensive line for our family's dignity. The last time I saw Mom before the fog of her illness truly took her, she gripped my wrist with surprising strength. Her eyes were clear, just for a second. "The necklace, Arthur," she whispered, her voice a dry rattle. "It represents everything we built." She didn't say who it was for. She didn't have to. Clara would have seen it as a $100,000 starting pistol for her next escape. But Mom's words weren't about money. They were about memory, about legacy. And I knew, in that sterile, quiet room, that my mother's last wish, "Take care of Clara," had a hidden meaning. It wasn't a request. It was a challenge. And protecting our mother's legacy from Sinaware was the only way to truly honor it. The plan crystallized 3 months before Mom died, in the sterile quiet of my workshop. Under the unforgiving glare of my gemologist's lamp, I laid out the materials. Not diamonds, but the highest grade moissanite, stones so brilliant they could fool a layman's eye from a foot away. I spent a week cutting and setting them into a platinum-plated silver chain, an exact mirror of the original. The weight, the drape, the way the light danced off the facets, it was my masterpiece of deception. The real necklace, a constellation of flawless, heirloom diamonds, went into the temperature-controlled vault at my office, safe behind 2 feet of reinforced steel. I made the swap during one of my last visits. Mom was sleeping, her breath a shallow whisper in the room. Clara was conveniently stuck in traffic. I lifted the heavy fake from my pocket, its metal cool against my skin. With trembling hands, I unclasped the real one from the velvet bust on her dresser and replaced it. The click of the clasp sealing the replica in place felt like a final, necessary sin. I was protecting my mother's legacy by replacing it with a lie. The funeral was Clara's magnum opus of manipulation. She wore a black dress so perfectly tailored it looked more like a fashion statement than a sign of mourning. She sobbed, but her eyes were dry. She clutched a handkerchief, but it remained pristine. I watched her work the room, collecting condolences like trading cards. Her grief, a performance for an audience she believed was captivated. Her hand would flutter to her chest, her voice would crack as she recounted some fabricated, tender moment with Mom. All the while, her gaze kept drifting towards the stairs, towards our mother's bedroom where the jewelry box sat. She was a vulture circling, waiting for everyone to be distracted by their own sorrow. Back at the house, the air was thick, with the smell of catered sandwiches and quiet grief. Clara found me in the study, pouring a whiskey I desperately needed. She placed a hand on my arm, her touch as cold as her heart. "Artie," she whispered, her voice a practiced, fragile thing. I need a moment. In her room, to feel close to her one last time." I just nodded, my face a stone mask. "Take all the time you need, Clara." I didn't follow her. I didn't have to. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening. I heard the soft creak of the floorboards above, the faint, distinctive snap of the heirloom box being opened. A few moments of silence, and then a tiny, almost imperceptible gasp of triumph. It was the sound of a safecracker hearing the final tumbler fall into place. When she came back down, her eyes were shining with a light that had nothing to do with tears. She had the box tucked under her arm. "I'm going to hold on to this for a while," she said, her voice attempting to be gentle. "Just for safekeeping. You know how sentimental I am." "I know exactly how you are, Clara," I replied, my voice flat. She missed the edge in my tone entirely, too blinded by her victory. She gave my arm a final, patronizing squeeze and headed for the door, the worthless necklace nestled in its satin bed. My eyes flickered back to the security monitor on my desk, to the live feed of her at the airport. There she was, the victorious thief, about to board a flight to a new life, funded by a lie. She thought she was holding a fortune. In reality, she was just a star in a story I had written, and the final chapter was about to begin. I clicked off the monitor, the image of Clara at the boarding gate vanishing into black. I took a slow sip of the Islay whiskey, letting the peaty smoke curl on my tongue. There was no rage, no fire of indignation, only the cold, quiet satisfaction of a perfectly executed plan. I walked through the silent house, gathering the half-eaten sandwich platters and empty glasses. I was cleaning up her mess, just like I always had. But this time, it felt different. It felt final. The next 2 weeks were a study in routine. I went to my office at Sterling & Sons. I held priceless emeralds up to the light, authenticated a Cartier watch from the 1920s, and comforted a widower who brought in his late wife's engagement ring. I was surrounded by genuine articles, by objects of real sentiment and value. It was a cleansing contrast to the counterfeit life my sister was attempting to build for herself. I didn't have to track her. I knew she would reach out. The truly greedy can never enjoy their spoils in silence. They need an audience. The call came on a Tuesday morning. The caller ID flashed a foreign number. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Artie. Her voice was syrupy, stretched thin over a bad connection. I could hear the clink of ice in a glass and the faint sound of ocean waves. I just wanted to see how you were. I found this little wellness retreat in the Maldives. It's been so healing. The Maldives, I said, my voice deliberately flat. I picked up a loupe and examined a sapphire on my desk. That's nice, Clara. It is, she purred. I'm finally getting my head straight. I feel free. I think Mom would have wanted this for me. She was fishing, waiting for me to ask how she was affording it, waiting for the accusation so she could play the victim. I refused to give it to her. I'm glad you're finding peace, Clara. It's what matters. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air. Listen, our cousin Susan called. She was asking about Mom's necklace. I told her you were holding on to it for safekeeping. A beat of silence on her end. Oh, right, yes, of course. It's perfectly safe with me. I know it is, I said, my tone gentle, almost reassuring. I was just thinking, with something that valuable, you should probably get it insured, especially if you're traveling. I still have the original appraisal paperwork from GIA right here. I could scan it and send it over. You'll need it for the policy. The silence that followed was longer this time, heavier. The sound of the waves seemed to have stopped. I could almost hear the gears grinding in her head, the smooth facade of her new life beginning to crack. Clara, you there? Yes, she finally said, her voice a little tighter. That's a good idea, Artie. Send it over. I hung up the phone and turned back to my computer. The file was already on my desktop, a digital time bomb. I drafted a new email. Subject, for your records, Mom's necklace. The body of the message was brief, professional. Asterisk, Clara. As discussed, please find the GIA certification and original 1958 purchase appraisal for Mom's necklace attached. I'd recommend a policy covering at least $150,000 to account for inflation. Stay safe, Arthur. I attached the scanned documents. The GIA certificate was first. A crisp, scientific breakdown of the main stone. A 3.2 carat D color, internally flawless diamond. A perfect stone. Followed by the side stones, each one meticulously catalogued. Then came the appraisal, its elegant, typed font, detailing the platinum setting and the bespoke clasp mechanism. Every detail screamed authenticity, value, and history. It was a blueprint for a masterpiece Clara was not holding. I hit send. For the next 48 hours, the silence from the Maldives was louder than any screaming match we'd ever had. I imagined her opening that email. The initial flicker of smug satisfaction, seeing the 6-figure valuation in black and white. Then, the slow, creeping dread. I pictured her taking the fake from its box, the Maldivian sunlight making the cheap moissanite sparkle, but without the deep, cold fire of a real diamond. She'd hold it in her palm. The weight would be wrong. The platinum-plated silver would feel too light, too warm against her skin. She'd look at the GIA report, at the laser-inscribed serial number it mentioned on the diamond's girdle. A number she would never find on the stone she was holding, no matter how hard she looked. The bespoke clasp described in the appraisal wouldn't match the standard issue one I'd used. The paradise she'd bought with a lie was crumbling around her. She was on an island, literally and figuratively, with a worthless piece of glass and metal. Her ticket to freedom had just become the chain holding her down. The call came on Friday, just as I was closing the shop. The number was the same, but the energy crackling through the line was venomous. Arthur. Her voice was a low hiss, stripped of all its artificial sweetness. Clara, I said calmly, leaning back in my chair. Everything all right? Did you get the email? Don't you play dumb with me? She snarled. The sound of waves was gone. I heard the sterile quiet of a hotel room. This necklace, it's a fake. It wasn't a question. It was a conviction spat out with the force of a shattered illusion. A fake? I let a note of concern enter my voice. Clara, that's impossible. I saw you take the box from Mom's room myself. Are you sure? Maybe the light is funny over there. I took it to a jeweler here. A little shack on the resort. He put a tester on it and laughed in my face. He called it a tourist-quality replica. He offered me $50 for the chain. Her voice was climbing, cracking with hysteria. Where is it, Arthur? Where is the real necklace? I let the silence sit for a moment, letting her desperation marinate. So let me get this straight, I said slowly, my voice dropping to a clinical, analytical tone. You took our mother's most cherished possession, a family heirloom, to a pawn shop in the Maldives, just days after her funeral. Why would you do that, Clara? Were you planning on selling it? She stammered, caught in the trap of her own admission. No! I was just curious about the insurance. The insurance, I repeated, savoring the word. Right. The insurance I suggested you get. The insurance for which I sent you the official paperwork. The paperwork for a $100,000 heirloom that is currently locked in my office vault, where it has been for the last 4 months. The line went dead quiet. I could hear her breathing, ragged and fast. She had no more lies to tell. I had taken them all away. You swapped them, she whispered. It was the sound of total, unadulterated defeat. I protected it, I corrected her, my voice hard as a diamond. I protected Mom's legacy. The same legacy you tried to sell for a sports car when you cleaned out her savings. The same legacy you hawked piece by piece every time you needed a new dress or a trip you couldn't afford. That necklace was the last thing left, Clara. The last piece of our family you hadn't yet managed to consume. You can't do this to me, she pleaded, her voice now turning thin and reedy, the voice of the 10-year-old girl caught stealing a locket. I'm stuck here, Artie. I spent everything to get here. How am I supposed to get home? That sounds like a you problem, I said, the words cold and precise. You've always been so good at marketing, Clara. You always land on your feet. I'm sure you'll figure it out. I thought of our mother, working extra shifts at the library, her face etched with a quiet shame she should never have had to bear. Mom's last wish was for me to take care of you, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. And I finally am. You're on a beautiful island, Clara. You wanted to grieve. So grieve. Grieve for everything you've thrown away. I ended the call before she could respond, setting my phone down on the polished wood of my desk. The checkmate wasn't about the money. It was about forcing her to finally look into a mirror and see the counterfeit staring back. She was stranded in her fake paradise, with a fake necklace, living a fake life that had finally, blessedly, run out of credit. For a long moment, I sat in the profound silence of my empty office, the ghost of her panicked voice still hanging in the air. There was no triumph, no rush of adrenaline. There was only a quiet, solemn finality. I stood, walked over to the main vault, and spun the heavy, wheel-like handle. Inside, nestled in a new velvet case, lay our mother's real necklace. I lifted it out. The platinum was heavy, cool, and substantial in my hands. The diamonds didn't just sparkle. They drank the low light of the room and threw it back with a deep internal fire. This was real. This had weight. This was the legacy Clara had tried to trade for a 5-star hotel and a fleeting sense of superiority. I placed it back in the vault, closed the massive steel door, and spun the dial. The series of soft clicks as the tumblers engaged sounded like a final, closing chapter. The next morning my phone began to buzz. Then it wouldn't stop. A torrent of texts from Clara. The first few were pleading. Koz unspaker. Artie, please. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Just send me the money for a ticket home. I deleted them without reply. Then came the anger. You monster. How could you do this to your own sister? Mom would be ashamed of you. I read that one, a bitter smile touching my lips. Mom would be ashamed of what led us here. Then came the threats. She'd tell everyone what I'd done. She'd ruin my reputation. She'd sue me. I let the messages pile up, a digital monument to her spiraling desperation. After the 50th message, I simply blocked her number. The sudden silence was a relief. Of course, she wasn't done. A few days later, my cousin Susan called. Her voice was laced with a nervous concern that was pure Clara. "Arthur? I just got off the phone with Clara. She's in some kind of trouble. She said you have Mom's necklace and you won't give it to her. She said you trapped her overseas." I didn't sigh. I didn't raise my voice. I kept my tone level, professional, the same way I would explain the flaws in a poor quality stone. "Susan, let me ask you a question. Do you remember when Mom's emergency fund, the antique brooches, disappeared a few years ago?" There was a pause on the line. "Yes," Susan said slowly. "And do you remember what happened a month later?" I continued, not leaving her time to think of a defense for Clara. Clara pulled up in a brand new $50,000 sports car, claiming she'd gotten a, quote, big marketing bonus. Mom had to take on extra shifts at the library just to pay her property taxes that year. Do you remember that? The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I had just presented an undeniable truth, a piece of family history that everyone had quietly ignored for the sake of peace. "Clara told me." Susan started, her voice faltering. "She said she just wanted to get the necklace insured. And I'm sure that's what she told the pawnbroker in the Maldives too," I said softly. I heard Susan's sharp intake of breath. I had laid out the facts, and like a perfectly cut diamond, the truth was clear, hard, and brilliant. "I have the necklace, Susan. It's safe. It's exactly where Mom would want it to be. Clara is simply facing a consequence she has spent her entire life avoiding." When we hung up, I knew Clara's last line of support had been severed. She had weaponized family sympathy for the last time. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of perfect, uninterrupted quiet. I half expected a call from the U.S. Embassy, but it never came. Clara was resourceful when her own survival was on the line. Then, an email landed in my inbox. The sender wasn't Clara. It was from a name I didn't recognize, with the subject line, "Guest Folio Inquiry, Clara Sterling." My heart beat a little faster. I opened it. The email was from the general manager of the Maldivian resort. It was polite, professional, and utterly damning. "Bish Mr. Sterling, we are writing to you as the emergency contact listed on Miss Clara Sterling's registration. Miss Sterling checked out 3 days ago, leaving an outstanding balance of $17,432. She informed us you would be settling her account. We have her luggage in storage pending payment. Please let us know how you would like to proceed." Attached was a PDF of the itemized bill. Champagne, spa treatments, private dinners on the beach, a shopping spree at the resort boutique. She hadn't been grieving. She'd been living like a queen on a throne of lies. The manager had copied her on the email. I could feel her humiliation radiating through the screen. This wasn't a private family drama anymore. This was a debt collection notice. I hit reply, making sure to reply all, ensuring Clara's address was firmly in the CC field. My fingers moved across the keyboard with a surgeon's precision. There was no emotion in the words, only cold, irrefutable fact. "Dear manager's name, thank you for reaching out. To clarify, I am listed as Ms. Sterling's emergency contact for medical purposes only, not as a guarantor for her financial liabilities. I have not authorized, nor will I be settling, any charges on her behalf. Nam Sterling is an independent adult, solely responsible for her own debts. Any claim she made to the contrary is, regrettably, a misrepresentation on her part. I trust you will pursue the matter with her directly. Kenai Samashor Kmenation. Kenai Samation. Kenai Shin Maishin. Do Bine Dollar Sterling. Mene Samaishin. Mene Samaishin Maishin. Kenaishin Maishin Maishin. Gen Meischen, Geneischen Meischen. Kan Meischen Meischen. I klitsch la Schwarch was the sound of the last bridge being burned. I pictured Clara, wherever she was now, a cheaper hotel, a hostel, maybe even a bench, seeing that email, seeing her lies exposed, not in a private family argument, but in a cold professional takedown. She hadn't just lost the money, she'd lost her narrative. She could no longer paint me as the cruel brother. I was just a man refusing to pay for her vacation. The victory felt quiet, clean. It wasn't the hot, messy triumph she would have craved. It was the calm, resonant satisfaction of a perfectly balanced scale. I finally understood what Mom meant by, "Take care of Clara." It wasn't about enabling her, it was about ending the cycle. The next day, I went to the vault. I took out the real necklace. It felt different now. It wasn't a weapon anymore, it was a responsibility. Keeping it felt wrong, like hoarding the very thing I'd fought to protect from being hoarded. Clara thought it was a cash prize. Mom knew it was a symbol of everything they'd built. I called my lawyer. I instructed him to sell the necklace at a private auction. The full proceeds, every last cent of the $150,000 it was now worth, were to be used to establish the Eleanor Sterling Grant at the local library where she had worked. It would be an annual fund for aspiring young writers and artists in Boston, the kind of people Mom always championed. It was a legacy not of diamonds and platinum, but of opportunity and creation. The necklace would be transformed from a symbol of Clara's greed into a source of hope for countless others. Clara had tried to steal our mother's past. Instead, I used it to fund a future Mom would have loved. That was my true revenge. What would you do in my situation? Should I tell my sister she stole a fake, or just let her find out on her own when she tries to sell it?